Okay, moving on, the world of investing and payments is changing fast. It's changing weekly, if we're honest, every day probably. Bitcoin is a huge part of this evolution. So let's get the latest from Matt Harry, who is fund manager at DigitalX. Good to see you again, mate. How are you?
Good to see you too, Adrian. I'm very well.
Thanks for working with some of the issues in the background, but we've all got you loud and clear now, so it's good to get you on. Let's look at Elon Musk. Of course, the news this week around the fact that you can buy Teslas with Bitcoin. How did you see this story play out?
Well, look, I think it's an extremely positive development. I think many of your viewers will be aware that several weeks ago, Elon Musk, through his company Tesla, kind of paved the way, I guess you would say, for public companies to purchase and hold Bitcoin on balance sheet as a treasury or reserve asset. So he's gone one step further now, and he's actually come out and said that Tesla will now accept payment in Bitcoin for their vehicles. Why anyone would want to give up the world's best performing asset for the past 12 years in exchange for a depreciating asset like a car, I don't know. But it's certainly very, very positive, and just kind of underlines the broad level of adoption acceptance we're seeing across the board at the moment in Bitcoin.
Tell us a little bit more about what makes this significant for perhaps longer term. Does it, when people see Elon Musk making these decisions, do other businesses start to look at that and take it a lot more seriously in terms of, the actual exchange? Forget the price of Bitcoin, but what can be exchanged for Bitcoin?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, with PayPal and MasterCard and Visa and all these payment rails opening up digital currency functionality for their clients, there's a much broader acceptance at a merchant level in terms of payments in Bitcoin. Yeah, look, it's still not a great micropayments payment rail, I guess you would say. You're not going to go and pay for your morning coffee with Bitcoin, but you're not going to go and pay for your morning coffee with gold either. And Bitcoin doesn't need to be all things to all people. And right now, what we're seeing is acceptance of Bitcoin as a store of value asset. And certainly now we're starting to see these public companies allocate balance sheet to Bitcoin as an inflation hedge. So they prefer to be holding Bitcoin rather than cash, which, as we all know, the value of cash will be eroded over time. So it's a really kind of strong change in the narrative that we've seen, and forward-looking companies like Tesla actually allocating in such a manner just kind of removes or reduces career risk for other corporates looking to do the same thing, and just sort of paves the way for other corporates to get involved, which is great long term for Bitcoin.
Let's wrap up with the ETF side of things. There seems to be more and more conversation around whether an ETF will come in. I do not know too much about this story, so tell us, what do we need to know?
So we've been speaking about an ETF for a couple of years, and really what we're talking about is an SEC-approved ETF in the United States. There are a couple of Bitcoin ETFs that exist around the world in smaller geographies, like Brazil, Canada, Eastern Europe, but really the holy grail is once we have a Bitcoin ETF approved in the United States. There are 50 under consideration by the SEC at the moment, but more recently, so just this week, Fidelity, who I'm sure everyone's aware of as the world's fourth largest asset manager, has actually also submitted to the SEC for an ETF approval. So I think once these kind of low-cost index-style products start to proliferate, that'll provide a daily level of passive demand for Bitcoin and really smooth out volatility, which is a very important piece for some investors. So the fact that Fidelity has now stepped up to the plate is really encouraging. And as we know, when the first gold ETF was approved in Australia in 2003, we saw the gold price move from around 300 US to close to 2,000 US over the 7 years post that initial approval. So we expect it to be a very, very positive thing for the Bitcoin price as well going forward.
Yeah, we'll watch it closely for sure. It's probably the major story. If that drops, it will be, huge news, as you've mentioned. Mate, thanks so much for your time. We'll leave it there for now. Enjoy your weekend. We'll talk really soon.
You're quite welcome. Thanks, mate. Bye-bye.
Great stuff.